members of the committee. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today to testify on matters related to the Texas Public Information Act. I think this is going to be, I anticipate, a really exciting conversation because there's so much alignment in the room and all day on issues of transparency and the public's right to access government records. So. My name is Carrie Griffith, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Our Schools, Our Democracy, which is a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit organization established just 2 years ago to protect the fundamental rights of all Texans to free, quality public education. I've prepared comments today based on my organization's recent experience engaging with the Public Information Officer of the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts since the passage of Senate Bill 2 by the 89th legislature. I'll speak today regarding the effectiveness of the Act, entities not currently subject to the Act that we believe should be, and then I'm going to close with a couple of recommendations I believe would increase transparency for Texans. In February of this year, OSOD launched the Texas Center for Voucher Transparency, which is a public resource that exists to support transparency, fiscal responsibility, and fairness in the implementation of the $1 billion voucher program. Given that the law does not include reporting requirements for many data points of great interest to taxpayers, my team and the thousands of Texans who follow our work truly values the fundamental principles of Government Code 552, which we love, that we're pulling out the same poetry today, which is exciting, that government is the servant and not the master of the people. I understand our rights as requesters of public information to include the right to anonymity, the right to be treated equally to all requesters, and prompt access to information, among several others. So I want to first begin by expressing my sincere appreciation for the Comptroller's Office. By and large, our relationship we've been engaged with them pretty frequently, and it's been really courteous, and they've been very responsive to our requests. The center exists to support transparency in the voucher program, and so we rely on this act and the integrity of the staff to fill the information void between the data collected by the Comptroller's Office and the data that's reported publicly. So especially in instances where we needed to correspond directly with the agent, staff has been, like I said, courteous and very responsive and adherent to our rights laid out in code by and large. We've submitted several requests for information since the passage of the law, so I believe we're in a unique position to contribute to the conversation regarding potential for some improved areas of effectiveness. So regarding effectiveness, I'm going to speak to a couple areas. The first relates to the timeliness and completeness of records requests, which my previous panelists spoke to. We've experienced multiple examples of delays, extended deadlines, incomplete or unrelated responses, and also questionable claims of responsive records supposedly not existing. For example, in April, we submitted a request for a file with the TIFA awardees disaggregated by several variables. We had to submit 2 separate requests. There were 7 extensions. We received an incomplete response without an explanation for the missing data after the final extension. So 51 days after our initial request, we're still left asking. There are also examples of several instances where we've had to make repeated requests for the same questions because the responsive records, again, were either incomplete or they were answers to questions that we weren't asking. We have about 6 outstanding requests for which we've not received complete or relevant responses. And then we also have a couple instances of a request being sent to Attorney General rulings. Finally, again, my neighbor over here spoke to the same point. We've had to submit public information requests for data that was statutorily obligated to be included in a report in the annual demographics report due on August 1st, but it was missing. So when we submitted a request for the missing data, our response was the very document that was missing the data in question. We also are filing a request today for the legislative appropriation request for the Comptroller's education program that was due last week, which is yet to be posted publicly on the LBBU website or the Comptroller's website. The TEA LAR isn't posted either, I don't believe. We are concerned that the FERPA threshold being used by the comptroller's office is arbitrary and a bit high. We find it to be unnecessary and a detriment to Texans' right to public information. So we, the public, can't access voucher-related data for 560 school districts. So that's half the districts in the state, because the reply is that fewer than 30 children are participating in the program. So understood that this decision is being made to protect the privacy of students, but the information being requested isn't exposing any personal data, but also, for example, TEA uses 10 as the FERPA threshold, and so when they're reporting demographic data, and so there's a discrepancy there that's unclear. I think a consistency would be better, and I think it would benefit the districts, and especially our smaller rural districts, to pass more informed budgets. But also, again, the public doesn't have to defend its right to ask for records, and it just is withholding information that I believe shouldn't be withheld for FERPA reasons. Regarding entities not subject to the Act, we have some concerns about the subcontractors in the voucher program who have no requirement to release records. So SB2 authorizes the comptroller to contract with a certified educational assistance organization, and the organization in Texas is Odyssey. And that organization can then enter into contracts to market its program. We've requested and received the contract between the comptroller and Odyssey for $26 million over the first biennium. But we are unable to secure any of the contracting negotiations or arrangements between Odyssey and its subcontractors. Which, there was a lot of conversation this morning and concern raised, and it sounded like there was sort of a lot of alignment in the alarm when taxpayer dollars are going into private organizations, and the public is unable to track or trace the use of those funds. And so I understand there are parameters around a private profit-driven entity that has some proprietary rights, and I get and respect that, but I think that there should be some public access to contractual relationships when taxpayers are funding the contracts. And then finally, to close, we have a couple recommendations that we believe would be helpful to serve transparency. First, again, I'm echoing Chairman Vasut. We're on the same page here today. Just post it, right? I mean, we believe. I have a specific request in my testimony. We believe the comptroller's office should post a cross-tabulated data file showing the income levels, disability categories, and participation patterns of participants in the voucher program. It's not an obligation of the law, but this detailed information has been collected in the application process, and so our request and recommendation is that it just be posted. The more that is there, the more we would ease the burden on the panel before and representative officers, because it would result, hopefully, take AI out of the picture, but hopefully in fewer public information requests. And then finally, and I understand this isn't the charge of this committee, but in that you've been charged to examine the right of Texans as it relates to public information, I think it's prudent to state the obvious, that there's only value in the Public Information Act to the extent the state commits to collecting and reporting the numbers that matter. So thank you so much. I'm happy to take questions. Appreciate, again, the invitation and your work on this issue.
Thank you for your testimony.